I really appreciate you all coming. So I write for the Forest Park Review, and I first discovered this story back in 1992, and I've been researching it ever since. So, have any of you ever heard of Edmonia Lewis?
No.
Wait, we got one in the back there. Kathleen? What do you know about Edmonia Lewis?
She was a famous African-American sculptor.
That's good. Anybody else? I saw it on her hand.
Her work is now, her works are in the Smithsonian.
Okay. Don't give too much away. Okay.
All of her works are in this, or many of her works.
Many. Has anybody heard of Cleopatra?
Yes. No.
Anybody know anything about Cleopatra?
She was the queen of Egypt.
The Queen of Egypt. Anything else?
She was Roman.
Roman. Who said she was Roman? That's not right, but we haven't had a final exam yet. You'll be okay.
She and her brother had issues.
Oh, she was Greek.
She was Greek.
She was the first woman to rule.
That's very good.
So she was the consort of Caesar and Mark Antony?
Wow.
Both?
No, Richard Burton. Yeah.
How was she Greek if she was in
I'll
Egypt?
explain that. Let's not give too much away here. What's that? Yes. Well, anyway. So our book is called The Ghost of Cleopatra. Isn't that a great title?
Yes.
It's only been used once for an episode of Scooby-Doo. So I think we're okay. Yes, it was used once for Scooby-Doo. Where are you? So what happened was I had been researching Edmonia Lewis and her statue since 1992, as I mentioned. And a woman named Gail Tanzer came to me. She writes books about sculptors. And she wanted to do Edmonia Lewis, and she heard I was the leading authority on Edmonia Lewis. So normally I would just give her all my stuff and I wouldn't, make a dime. But anyway, I said, Gail, you and I are going to write this book together. Okay. So I wrote the nouns, Gail wrote all the verbs, and it just came together, So we spent 9 months, just like a baby, and we wrote the book. And we have a publisher that's very interested, who also likes this idea that we're doing some talks here locally. And he's going to come to one of these, I think. So this is like a book signing without a book. So I wish the book was here. But the book is supposed to be published in 2017. So let me tell you a little bit about Edmonia Lewis. Her full name is Mary Edmonia Lewis. She was born in 1844. Her dad was a freed slave from Haiti. His name was Edmund Lewis. Her mother was a Chippewa Indian, and she was female. So that's 3 strikes. In 1844, that was not good to be those 3 things. But she had a brother named Samuel, who struck it rich in the gold rush of 1849 in California. And Samuel pretty much supported Edmonia during her life. So Edmonia tried attending some white schools, and she ended up at Oberlin College in Ohio, which was the only college that would take black and white, male and female. Okay, very progressive school. And so when our story begins, she's in her senior year at Oberlin, and she has been accused of poisoning her white classmates, Maria and Christina. So poor Edmonia was arrested for 2 counts of attempted murder. Okay? But before she can go to trial, a racist mob beats her. Okay? So just to start out on a light note, the book begins with Edmonia after her beating. So, has anyone read Devil in the White City?
Yes.
Okay, well, we kind of try to follow that model. We have 3 narratives. We have the Edmonia narrative, which Gail, my co-author, wrote. We have the statue narrative, which I wrote. And we have the Cleopatra narrative, which I wrote. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little taste of each narrative, which this is going to take about 15 minutes. Okay? So the whole novel is 15 hours. You guys have time? No. It's around 300 words.
Gosh, I hope it comes out on audiobook.
So here's Okay. So I'm going to start. So this is The Ghost of Cleopatra, a work of historical fiction by John Rice and Gail Tanzer. This is a table of contents. That's a spoiler alert. We're not going to read that. So one of our characters wrote the prologue, which is pretty amazing. So I'm going to read you the prologue. What is created cannot be separated from the creator. I came back to life as a statue in the mid-19th century. Mary Edmonia Lewis was my sculptor. Her background, experiences, and frustrations in life paralleled many of mine. She was the ideal artist to recreate me. Little did either of us know my statue, masterpiece that it was, would meet more challenges than either Edmonia or I ever faced. In our own words, Edmonia, my statue, and I will tell you our story. Now, the prologue is signed Cleopatra, and we had a handwriting analyst, and this is all legit. So, now, another quick note is, so the premise of our book is that the spirit of the Cleopatra inspired Edmonia Lewis to create her greatest statue, which is called The Death of Cleopatra. That statue was in Forest Park for 70 years. So a lot of the story takes place right here in Forest Park. 70. 70 years, yes. Okay. So we'll start with the Edmonia narrative. And here's the first chapter. Part 1, Abandoned. Mary Edmonia Lewis is 18 years old. It's 1862. And I'm easily distracted. Okay. So this is Edmonia after her beating. Lying on the snowy ground, I just wanted to sleep. I imagined the soft mound where my head rested was my pillow. As the cold crept into my flesh, it dulled the pain of my bleeding wounds and deep bruises. The places where my dress was torn felt even colder. I shivered and felt like I might freeze to death. I knew that the boys who did this to me had left me here to die. I wanted to get up, but my legs no longer worked. My heart was hardly beating. I could scarcely breathe. I sank deeper into the snow, longing for sleep to release me. But I couldn't drift off because of the bells, the alarm bells. Were they ringing for me? I slipped into a dark, cold place. A while later, I heard voices and felt people picking me up and carrying me. Again, I went to the dark place. The next thing I remember was my head resting on a real pillow and my eyes staring at a ceiling. I looked around the room and saw the plain white walls where the only picture was Jesus knocking at a door. It made me realize I was in my room at Oberlin College. My eyes closed. Somewhere between sleep and wakefulness, I experienced what I thought was a terrible nightmare. I was walking to the outhouse when a group of tall boys came out of nowhere. One of the boys snarled a curse, but in my dream I could not make out what he said. Before I could say anything, two of the boys grabbed my arms, and two others picked up my legs. I kicked with all my might and yelled. They brought me to a field down the block from my rooming house, where they hoped no one would hear me screaming. A big boy with blonde hair and yellow eyes was shouting at me. There must have been 7 or 8 of them, all laughing and looking like the evil spirits my family had warned me about. They formed a circle around me. Their faces were angry, and they were shouting at me, but I couldn't understand their words. They all set upon me at once. One yanked off my Ojibwe necklace, all of its purple and white beads of so much value to my mother fell to the ground. Another yanked my pinafore down from my shoulder. No matter how much I tried to pull away, he succeeded. When another hiked up my skirt, I kicked him hard, but this only got him angrier. The pain of one pulling my hair and the other kicking me in the back brought me to my knees, then onto the snow. Everything went white. Half asleep in my room, I wondered, why didn't Auntie put out the dream catcher to capture that bad dream? Where were my father's totems, those spirits born in Africa that had often comforted me? When I lived with my Chippewa family and it was time to go to sleep, I felt protected, especially when I looked up and saw the dream catcher hanging from the birch bark ceiling. My beloved mother explained why dream catchers have so much power. A famous spirit, Spider Woman, watched over us Ojibwe children. When our people spread out over a long distance, she instructed the women of the clans to make hoops of willow and webbing and embed them with beads. Bad dreams will be caught in the webbing. A small hole in the middle allowed good dreams to come through. Feathers under the web let them trickle down to comfort a child. With all my heart and soul, I believed in the power of the dream catcher. Stabbing pains in my legs woke me up, and I stayed awake this time. Someone had dressed me in my nightshirt. I looked at an ugly bruise and bandages on my arms. Now I knew this wasn't just a nightmare. I felt so alone. Then I heard a voice. You have me, Mary. You will always have me. Who was talking? Shakily, I propped myself on my elbows. I turned my neck left and right to see where the voice was coming from. My teeth chattered. Who is it? Did you say something? That's the beginning of the Edmonia narrative. Now, this is the statue narrative. It's not easy to write like a statue, but I learned. The year is 1972, and I'm abandoned like Edmonia Lewis. I'm the queen of the Nile, and I'm sinking deep in the mud. I am reclined on my throne in the final spasm of death, the serpent still coiled around my right arm. My flesh is the finest Carrara marble, but my features are damaged or missing. My once perfect complexion has become sugary, roughened by exposure to wind and rain for 70-odd years. My once magnificent nose is smashed away, and a big chunk is missing from my noble chin. I'll stop right there. Come on in. All right, we got to start over. It'll take about another hour. I didn't get a chance. Let me just stop for a second. So Mary Edmonia Lewis's her most famous statue was called The Death of Cleopatra. It somehow ended up in Forest Park for 70 years.
Where was it?
It was on Roosevelt Road,
And what?
around Hannah. I mean, I don't want to give too much away here. But it was there for, now the statue is Carrara marble. It's never supposed to be outside at all, ever. Yeah. And it's outside. And as I was saying before you came in, thanks for coming. It's in bad shape. So I'll continue, right? So my once perfect complexion has become sugary, roughened by exposure to wind and rain for 70 odd years. My once magnificent nose is smashed away, and a big chunk is missing from my noble chin. My delicate sandals have weathered away, along with the royal hands that once ruled Egypt, and the feet that bestrode an empire. I am sinking in the mud of an excavating company under the leaden skies of Cicero, Illinois. The air is filled with smoke and nature's own gloom. The clank, clank, clank of a nearby foundry fills the air. Rusting hulks, bulldozers, front-end loaders, and dump trucks surround me. Vehicles that will never move again. Their engines scavenge for parts. Cannibalized vehicles rumble in and out of the yard. They make me quiver and shake and cause me to sink deeper into the mud. After parking their vehicles, the drivers sprawl on my lap. They think it's funny to sit on the Queen. They don't know who I am. They don't know who carved me. They have no idea what I've been through. They first met me in Forest Park. They had a government contract to dig a foundation for a post office, and I was smack in the middle of the dig. The workers draped me in chains and used a front-end loader to hoist me onto the bed of a lowboy truck. I didn't seem worth saving. Graffiti scarred and marred my breasts. Blue paint disfigured my face. I was badly stained from decades of abuse. I had a bit of beauty left. It was well concealed under layers of dirt. Normally, a piece of junk like me would have been shipped to a landfill. But as evidenced by the old hulks around me, this company didn't throw anything away. They didn't know what to do with me. So they lowered me onto the muddy ground at the rear of the yard and removed the chains. Not one of the workers knew I was a lost masterpiece the world had been missing for 70 years. This included their bosses, who for some reason couldn't bear to part with me. Okay, that was a statue. She's in a bad spot too, huh? Okay, and this is the last thing I'll read. This is the narrative by Cleopatra the Seventh, Queen of the Nile. We know about her, right? My spirit was not always captured in stone. My form was once flesh and blood. I was not the first Cleopatra. No, that was Alexander's beloved sister. He conquered my country 300 years before I was born. He gave Egypt as a reward to his most trusted general, Ptolemy. That's my father's name. My family, like Alexander, is from Macedonia. We built a splendid city bearing his name in our new land. From there, we ruled our subjects like the pharaohs before us. We were gods. We treated our subjects cruelly, yet they worshipped us. My father was a harsh ruler, like every leader of our dynasty. He spoiled his 6 children with gifts while his people starved. I was his favorite. I think it's because I had his long, prominent nose and strong chin. I had my father's features, but my skin was darker, like my Egyptian mother. She was softer than my father and had a heart for her people. Her name was also Cleopatra. I was not pretty. My brown eyes were set too far apart and deeply recessed. My mouth was small, and my lips anything but sensuous. I wore my brown hair pulled back into a simple bun. Physical beauty was not important to me as it was to my sisters. I saw it was based on symmetry of features. It wasn't earned, although some put a lot of work into it. It can also lead to heartache. A smart young woman recognized only for her beauty. The people I loved most had the angular features of my father. I had inherited more than that from him. He played the flute and devoured art and music. He listened to the learned philosophers of our age. He hired tutors for each of his children. None of my siblings took their lessons seriously. Learning was my greatest delight. My tutors taught me literature, art, music, and medicine. Philostratos taught me philosophy and rhetoric. He was an old man with a thin voice, but I was mesmerized by his words. He taught me the power of speech. Though I was shy inside, he forced me to recite classic speeches under his critical gaze. He corrected me constantly and insisted I relax, which made me even more nervous. Cleopatra, no one will listen to you unless your bearing and voice commands them. Don't cross your feet when you stand, but plant them apart like you own this earth. Don't fidget, but use your hands. He pumped his scrawny arm to strengthen your words. Stop looking down, he commanded. Look into my eyes until you're staring at my soul. When you speak to crowds, as I'm sure you will do one day, focus on the ones in front of you. Choose one on the left, one on the center, and one on the right. Command them not to look away as you pour out your words. His training turned me into a speaker who drew every eye and ear. But unlike my ancestors, I was not content to speak only in my native language. No, I wanted to speak to my people like my mother did in her gentle tone. Though we had ruled this land for 3 centuries, I was the first of my family to speak the language of Egypt. I also learned the languages of 4 other countries that comprise our vast empire. Our family ruled the land surrounding the sea back when Rome was only a rumor. Ha! They called their capital the Eternal City. Those upstarts with their savage ways. There was only one eternal city, Alexandria. I'm done. Thank you so much.